Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Hedgebrook's Cottage Chat with Chenoa Egawa. My name is Amber Flame, and I'm the program director here at Hedgebrook. And it is my great honor to have this wonderful conversation with this stellar alum of Hedgebrook. Chenoa's been doing some amazing things for us. She's been doing some amazing things for the world, and I'm really, really excited to bring her and her work to you today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Chenoa Egawa. Hi.
Hello. Good afternoon, Flame.
Good afternoon.
I'm here.
It's so lovely to have you again. Every time I get into a conversation with you, I walk away feeling so inspired, feeling like I need to do more, do more for my environment, for myself, for my community, that sense of community. And I'm super excited to bring you here to our Cottage Chat live stream. But before we get started, I know you have a lot to offer us. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you all know about this opportunity to work kind of really in depth with Chenoa and her work. This Friday, we have a Vortex Intensive. It's going to be a day-long intensive, and it launches from a workshop with Chenoa, talking about how to indigenize our own minds, our own education about the world, so that we can steward our youth, steward students, steward the people in our community to a better stewardship of the earth. And Chenoa is going to talk way more elegantly than I can about this. Chenoa, let me hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Flame. Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Chenoa Egawa, and I come from Lummi and Sklallam, both of which are Coast Salish tribes here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm recently, with my brother and we wrote this book together called The Whale Child. And it's about, it's a story of a young whale child who gets transformed into a human boy in order to bring teachings to the human race and talk about what's going on in the world's oceans. I am an artist and a singer and a person who's spent many, many years of my life now trying to hang on to the teachings that we have as Indigenous peoples and seeing how important they are in today's world for remembering our connection to everything, to one another, to the nature that gives us life. And so most of my work today is about talking around these issues, about these issues, so that we can remember and learn how to teach our children in a different way as well.
That's awesome. I'm sorry, I was muted because I thought you were going to launch right in. So I asked Chenoa if she would be willing to share some excerpts from The Whale Child. So you can see how astounding this story is, how wonderful this story is. But also, I love a story time. I love a good story time. And you are such a wonderful storyteller. So I'm really excited about this. Chenoa is going to share an excerpt from The Whale Child. And we have the link to buy The Whale Child for you and the youth in your life right there in the chat.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Chapter 1. In our world today, there lives a whale child born not so long ago in the waters of the South Pacific Ocean. You may have seen him from the shore, off in the distance, swimming with his mother. Like all children, he came into the world with kindness in his soul, an eagerness to learn, and the open mind of a newborn. He arrived with the strength of all the ancestors who came before him, and many other gifts yet to be realized. His name arose from the movements of the great sea, and the light reaching down through the water, sparkling beneath the waves, though it is a name that cannot be pronounced with our human voices. Sunlight dances, shines, and shimmers upon the water's surface as the whale child passes, and when he is close, countless creatures of the world's oceans feel hope within the currents made by the movements of his fins. Bright light twinkles within the inky blackness of the whale child's eyes, as if the stars came down from their home in the night sky to rest there in his gentle gaze. From the earliest days of his life, the whale child's mother taught him the language of the sea through timeless songs that carried the stories and wisdoms of life on earth. She told him how water is the source of life, not only the dark and salty water of their ocean home, but the water that flows sweet and clear over the land, the water that sits in still lakes, ponds, and marshes, and the water that falls down to us from the sky. All of these many pathways joining together to create the living veins of our planet. Listen and remember, said the whale child's mother. The earth's waters are sacred, as all living things must have water to survive. Listen and remember. All creatures of the ocean were healthy and strong back when clean waters could carry a song to the ears of others far away in bountiful oceans through dark night and bright day. But now I will show you things that are happening in the sea and on land. And you, my child, you will share what you learn. The whale child and his mother traveled great distances, following their migratory paths back and forth between the warm blue waters near the equator and those that were dark green and very cold farther north. Along the way, his mother began showing him things happening to their ocean world because of the people who lived on the land. Along the way, she showed him how things were changing. One night, as the mother and her child floated peacefully at the surface, resting from their travels, the whale child dreamed. In his dream, the moonlight reached down into the deep ocean, and he saw a human woman in the distance swimming toward him. Her long dark hair flowed out behind her and rippled in the current like smooth black seaweed. The whale child knew this was more than a dream. He knew that it was showing him what was to come. He did not yet know how or why, but he knew this woman would soon welcome him onto the shore of the human world. When his mother awoke, she confided, I had the same dream as you, and what you dreamed was true. You have family on land as you do in the sea. We are all connected. We are all related. Now, my son, you will walk on 2 feet as men do, and you will meet a woman and her daughter where the surf meets the sand. The woman is your human mother. The little girl is your human sister. To this little girl, you will pass on our teachings, and by helping her, she will in turn help others bring healing to the world. As tomorrow's sun rises, you will emerge from the sea as a human boy, and you will show your little sister that being a caretaker of the earth begins with taking care of the water that all life depends on. Your visit on land will be very short, but during the quickly passing time, you will show her that she can help overcome the things you and I have seen on our travels, one smart step at a time. Before the whale child could ask his mother more about what all of this meant, the tiny bioluminescent lights that glitter throughout the ocean gathered around him. The water swirled and churned, forming the shape of the water spirit. And as the whale child watched in amazement, the water spirit reached out with a long arm of seawater and starlight and gently touched him on the top of his head. Then the whale child began to change. He shrank and grew skinny as his thick hide became thin. The deep gray of his body faded until soon he was the color of the humans on the shore, and his skin reflected the lights that swirled around him, making him glow within the deep shadows of the ocean, like the lure of an anglerfish. His fins became arms, and where his powerful tail had been, there were now 2 human legs, kicking to keep his new body afloat. His eyes moved forward from the sides of his head, and soon he was looking toward the beach where the humans lived. Then the water spirit disappeared. The water became dark and calm again, and the whale child was a boy paddling out in the deep ocean. Go ashore now, my son, the mother whale pressed fondly. They are expecting you. Take with you all of my love and confidence, and I will remain out here to watch over you from the bay. At that, the boy swam toward the shore, and each time he poked his head out from the water, he could see the hulking shapes of hills and mountains in the distance, growing closer. When the water was nearly shallow enough for him to stand, he ran face first into a pair of old surf shorts floating on the surface. I guess this is lucky, he thought aloud. A human losing his shorts in the ocean and me finding them. He had seen people before and the clothing they put on their bodies. So for the first time, he stood on his new legs. How strange is this, he muttered as he awkwardly climbed into the shorts, one leg and then the other, feeling the gritty sand against his feet and between his toes. Although he could wade the rest of the distance to the beach, he slipped back beneath the surface and swam forward, feeling the weight of the unknown upon him. But the comfort of his mother's love remained strong and steady within each beat of his heart as he made his way through the push and pull of the shifting tides, and he was not afraid.
Oh, I'm muted. I said, wow, thank you. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you.
I'm so excited. What I love about this book is that it reminds me of Afrofuturism. It reminds me of that sort of like that mystic. I love sci-fi and fantasy, and I love that this transformation journey that is actually at the beginning of the journey instead of it's the whale child transforms to bring transformation for us, and that's
Right, right.
just wonderful and astonishing and super enjoyable.
Mhm.
Tell me why how did this book come to be? What did you want to do with it?
This book actually came through a real dream that my sister had. And it was at the time that her son was about to be born. And she had this dream where she was swimming in the ocean and she came upon a whale and she looked into the eye of the whale, and the whale was looking back at her, and then the whole eye went black. And in that darkness, a baby's eye appeared, and she could see this unique way that this little whale was looking at her, and she could tell that it was a baby. And right after that happened, she woke up and she forgot the dream and told her husband, the baby's coming and we need to go to the hospital. So she realized when the first time she held the baby after he was born that he had the same blink as the baby whale in the dream she'd had the night before he was born.
Wow.
And so the story came about through a responsibility. Like, each person is born with a purpose on this earth, I believe. And we need to help our children remember what their purpose is, and we need to be there to support them in the best way that we can so that they can fully realize that potential that they carry. And I felt like it was a responsibility, along with my brother, who's the co-author and co-illustrator of the book. We felt that it was a responsibility on our end to share these teachings that the book has with our children so that they would know about how they're interconnected with the nature, and that we are constantly blessed by the air, the water, the fire, the sun, the moon, the stars, the plants, the animals. Without any one of those things, we wouldn't be here as human beings. And so we felt an importance, like a calling to do this book together and to share the teachings for the children in our family, the nephew that inspired the story, and all the other children that we know, and that we need to tell them that this is important, that we remember this as human beings, because in our world today, we're forgetting these teachings and getting further disconnected from ourselves, each other, and the world at large, nature. And so that was one of the main reasons we wrote the book, is that we wanted him to remember, and we wanted our children to remember who they are and how the sacredness of their birth and how they come into this world and what it is to actually be here on this earth. That sometimes we take that for granted, but it's a miracle that all of us are here, and it's a miracle that this planet gives life in the way that it does, and that we can experience all of this, all of the different things that we experience here as human beings. So that's part of the reason.
That's just a small part, just a small part of the reason. It's so funny every time. Like, this is not the first time I've asked these kind of questions of Chenoa, because we've been talking for months now, and I love it because it enriches my understanding of that idea of place. Even just now while you were talking, I was like, I just did a meditation today that was just really thinking about the ability of your body to bring in air, and how your heart keeps pumping.
Right.
And you don't tell it to do that. And just to just sit in a space of gratitude for the being you inhabit, the shell that holds your soul
Right.
in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And and then what came immediately after was I saw somebody post on some social media a meme, and it was basically a letter from the earth to humans, and they
Right.
were like, you're over here looking at Mars, and Mars is hot and dry, and there's very little water. Like, here I am, luxurious and abundant, and all I've done is love you. All I've done is support you. instead of trying to, go somewhere else, why don't you stay here and work on this relationship? I love it. Like, it was just framed like almost like a relationship, right? Like an intimate relationship. Like,
Yes.
why don't you take care of me the way, instead of like, grass is always greener, but it's not greener. It's very dry and dusty.
Very dry desert.
And I just love this idea. I think it's grown into a bigger mission. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about this bigger mission that this book is taking on and some of the opportunities that you're finding, because it's now out in the world.
We've been looking at ways, my brother and I, to bring this book to schools, to the Seattle public schools. We started there, and really beginning the conversation to say, how are we teaching our children? What are we teaching our children, and what value is that to them in their life? Does that just help them to go out and want to make a lot of money and have some fame and some good fortune and have that power and and the finance to do whatever they want? But I feel like and all our kids obviously don't have the same opportunities, and so we're looking at that as well. But I think what we've learned recently is through this experience with the pandemic, that we all had to go back home, and we all had to sit for a while by ourselves, months, before we were able to go out again and really look at the way we're living our lives and see whether or not this is really sustainable. I just got back from traveling for the first time in 15 months, and it was a strange experience. It was good. It was a good experience, but I could see where there's some things that are necessary that you should do and travel and go out, and then other areas where we don't need to always be going, like somewhere else, like Mars, like what you're saying too. It's like, what's going on right here at our home, and how. And I think as Native people, we look at that. That's why we still have the teachings about our interconnectedness with the plants and the seasons and nature, and because we haven't lost that connection over thousands and thousands of years of being in the same area that we were put by the creation stories. They talk about that, how we came to this land, and how we understand that all of the plants and the spirits of the water and the spirit of the earth, and these things they're taught to us as family, that we're a part of them and they're a part of us. And so I really think that we need to start teaching our children again in the schools about that interconnectedness, and really seeing how their own body, like what you were saying, when you're taking in a breath, that's the air spirit right there. The heart is like the fire spirit. And so how in our human body, we're actually like a microcosm of the macrocosm that's around us. And what is the wisdom there, so that we can take care of this body and actually understand how to do that, and care for ourselves and love ourselves enough to care for what's giving us life and to care for other people. And so I feel like education for a long time has been about the industrialization movement a long time ago that came in, and that was what our education system was based upon. And now it's really time to change. And so just going forward with conversations with educators and saying, why not change the system? What is keeping us from doing that? And this is what we could teach them. How do you work with nature? How do you go outside and plant a garden and tend life? How do you go out and see the forest and recognize that the oxygen is being, everything is being purified so that we can continue to breathe, and that we need these trees, and that these trees carry stories and wisdom, and the water, we need water to live. We came onto this earth through the water. And if we don't take care of our oceans and don't see the depth beneath the surface of what's going on, then we're going to be we're already seeing those crises happening. And we owe it to our children to help them navigate and find solutions and better ways of living, simpler ways of living, so that they can at least begin to find new ways of living that are based on wisdom from ancient times in our cultures.
Yeah, I think, we've talked a little bit about this. You and I have talked a little bit about how I grew up in the desert. I grew up in Arizona. And so coming here, there's such an abundance of life of things living, of water, of just, things just grow. You don't have to even try here. In fact,
Mhm.
if you're trying to grow certain things and not other things, you have to be really, really studious about that. Get out there. Um, but I think that it's easy sometimes when we're in that abundance. And I think about how the wildfires that are starting to be like a regular thing every summer have started to teach us, even here, that there is the preciousness of air, the preciousness of breath, the preciousness of being able to breathe with your full lungs. And then came the pandemic, and so many people took up gardening and cooking at home, and how
Yeah.
to, like, canning and pickling, and those kind of old school, for lack of a
Mhm.
better, like, old school ways of being sustainable.
Right.
And an interesting conversation, happened on social media around lawns, and how lawns aren't very useful to anybody, and like trying to cultivate
Right.
a lawn is not, it is not worth anything, right? It doesn't feed anything back. And somebody brought up the point that, like, being a gardener, really harvesting your own food, cultivating your own food, is its own job. It requires an investment of money and an investment of time. You got to put that sweat equity in, as they say, to make it successful, which just shows you how hard the world works
Mhm.
to provide for all these people. Like, if it's hard to do that for yourself in your backyard, imagine how hard the earth has been working to sustain us during this time. And I think the thing that really was just wonderful in talking to you is that it made me step back from my own individual day-to-day grind and think about, how am I supposed to teach my children if
Mhm.
I don't know myself, if I've never taken into account? We were talking on the phone, and you said, like, where does your water go when it leaves the house? Where does it come from? How does it come into your house? Do you know these things? And you wanting to share this with students and youth. And I was like, I think we need to start with the adult. We need to tell the
Yeah.
adults some
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
So that's why I was so excited that we're going to do this workshop with you on Friday, this day-long intensive. It's called the Vortex Intensive with Chenoa, Egawa. You can find information on our website. I hope you can join us. There's still some spots left. It's going to be a day-long dive into indigenizing our own minds, indigenizing our own understanding, using some of the discussion questions that are built for youth, essentially, to begin thinking about these things, as a place for us to um, make a commitment to our own understanding. Um, tell me a little bit about your travels, because I know they're really exciting. I've heard a little bit about them. Share with us a little bit about your travels recently.
Recently, oh, well, I take care of a lot of our traditional healing ways,
Hmm.
working with our elders, and those are prayers for healing and
Hmm.
understanding that when we're not well, it comes from many different factors, and so we take care of that, and it's always working through the elements, work
Hmm.
with the nature, and we understand that nature is the witness to our life, and so everything has been recorded. For instance, the fire is we call it, that's our grandfather, our eldest grandfather, that's witnessed everything since the beginning of time, and holds the memory of the human story in its
Right.
totality. And so we work with those spirits of the different elements to bring healing, and we work with different medicines, and I got to go also with one of our grandmother, and she's traveled to a place where we harvest different medicines, sacred medicines, since she was a young woman, and she's now 87 years old. And so for her, it was an important journey to go back to that place, since she hadn't been there since her husband passed on, and make those prayers and make those offerings. And all the people who'd come there before, since the very
Mm.
first people who traveled, maybe on foot to go there, maybe on
Right.
horseback to go there, and how it's become this sacred road, and uh, recognizing the teachings that are held by our elders, and really honoring the teachings that they have, and trying to continue to carry them and
Mm.
pass them on the way we're meant to, so that our children will know where they come from, and so that our children will have a strong foundation in relationship to the earth and in relationship to the stories that we have that are our teachings. And so it was a journey through Mexico and through the Southwest and over to my grandma's homeland, and so it was a special moment, honoring the life of one of our elders, and very meaningful journey. Yeah.
Nice. I'm so glad you got to travel. And it's like, it's hard because I think you were talking about seeing some of the damage and
Right.
seeing sort of like, can you
Right.
talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So when I went to Mexico, we were flying in, and I could see miles out before we got to the city we were going to fly into, just dark clouds, brown clouds, just for miles and miles and miles deep, like really thick, dark clouds. And just seeing the contamination. It's more of a desert area there too.
Right.
And seeing the impact of not having any kind of control over emissions from factories and companies, and the contaminants that are put into the air without any thought, and talking with people. And it's the same way in our country, not to say that Mexico is worse, but I think
Absolutely.
there's less controls than even we have. And I talked with a lot of the people that I was with, and they were just saying, there's a very little consciousness about what we're doing to the earth. And that scares me a little, to see that. And I could feel the effect of no water, no clean water. They're about to have water restrictions again down there. And so I think it's those kinds of crises that we have to come to sometimes when we're in a state of denial about the real situation that we're in, as far as climate change and the melting of the glaciers and the changing of the seasons and such. And so they're in for a hard time, and we are too in many places. In many places. Like you said, here in the Northwest, it's not as in your face, but 2 years ago it was with the forest fires.
Right.
I
That was scary.
breathing fire for 3 weeks. I can still feel the effect on my lungs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite come back from that. And so, we have to pull our head out of the sand and really acknowledge what's going on. And I feel like it's through that connection, the interconnectedness. Do we care for our water, or do we just take it for granted? Do we know where it comes from? Do we think of it as something sacred? I mean, there was a Japanese scientist who discovered that water was the most malleable element on the earth, and that it responds to our emotions and our feelings. And this is something we as Native people have known from the beginning, that it's one of the greatest healers. But if we don't even acknowledge it, and we buy our bottled water and then we throw half of it away because we don't want any more, or because we don't really think about it or care about it, then we need to wake up a bit. And so I really hope we're going to be able to do that. And this book and the work that I do is really just part of feeling that responsibility. Okay, I know I have these teachings. I need to share them. Somehow I need to share them.
So there's a responsibility, and I'm highlighting you so that I can lean into this. There's a responsibility. Talk a little bit about the joy of it. I love asking about the joy. What is the joy in this work for you?
The joy is that I have a relationship with the earth. I have a relationship with the elements. And I feel like the deeper you go into acknowledging and respecting the nature and the elements, that you actually have moments where you feel them acknowledging you back, because they have their own language of through feeling that they communicate with you. Or sometimes in a prayer, you'll be in ceremony and praying over the water, and then everyone's going to share that water, and in that moment it'll start raining outside.
Yeah.
And you feel that the water is listening to you, and the water is blessing you, and it's saying, yes, stand for me, share these things. This is a very giving Mother Earth. This is a very giving planet that we live on, and we need to take care of it, because we are a part of it. We are not separate. And I feel like there's a lot of beauty that can come to us through the way that we live and the way that we think. If we're positive and we do our best to pay attention to what we need to change in our life in order to acknowledge the sacredness of what is giving us life, each moment, the breath of life, the water that we work with every day from the time we get up, for eating and bathing and drinking and cleaning and everything that we do,
Right.
really acknowledging it. The sun, the moon, the stars, the sunrise, the sunset, the middle of the day, the phases of the moon, the way that the moon's affecting the tides and the way that it's affecting our spirits and our emotions. And I mean, there's so much wisdom, and it comes from many different cultures, our native cultures and cultures around the world that I know still teach these things, but I say in our dominant society, they've largely been forgotten or disregarded to the point that they aren't worth talking about or mentioning in schools or in homes or anything. So it is, you need to start over because a lot of people haven't received those things, those teachings. And they're beautiful things. To me, it brings joy because my life has come to a place where I get to stand up for what I believe in with this earth and how much I love this planet, how much I love the nature, and how amazed I am at the infinite creativity that it has. The beauty and the way that it's expressed from one landscape to another is unbelievably brilliant. And, we need to give some credit to the earth. And I know that in our human way, we think we're really brilliant. Maybe sometimes we think we're too brilliant, that we can outdo nature. I know sometimes I see planes going overhead, and I think man and the machine think that we're going to control the rain now, and we're going to control the water, and we're going to prevent the opening of the ozone. And it's like, just quit thinking that we're going to be the ones to do that. Nature knows what nature is doing. We just have to get behind nature and things can be better. But the more that humans think that they're in charge, the more destruction happens.
Absolutely.
The way I see it.
In so many ways, I feel like the pandemic was a pause button on that too. The realization that we're not in control and we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know how it's going to go. And then the amazing rebound that nature took just from the decrease in us, the decrease of us being out and trying to think we're in control of things, meant that so much of nature began to heal just by itself. You're right. The infinite possibilities of this land, this world, this earth is astonishing and beautiful. And I'm so grateful to have sat in conversation with you over this winter into spring moment where it was so vividly obvious. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the trees at Hedgebrook, because I'm sure they've talked to you too. But before we talk about that, I wanted to talk a little bit. Let's see. First, I would love for you to tell us, what are 3 things you would love for everyone to know and or do? What are like 3 big takeaways that you think everyone could do today to begin to truly join in the stewardship of this intimate relationship that we have as a part of the earth?
I think that varies for everyone because everyone thinks about things. I would say one exercise is, the one we talked about, knowing where your water comes from. Where does it come where does it come before it arrives in your faucet? And that's something in the story that we talk about. It's like the little girl is asked where the water comes from. And she says, that's easy. It comes out of the faucet. It's like, well, where does it come from before the faucet? And so it's an interesting exercise for everyone to discover where it comes from and how it arrives to us and what has happened to it along the way. How has it been treated? Does it run into any other contaminants along the way? And where does it go when it leaves the house? And how does it recycle? Because the same amount of water has been here since the beginning of time. And the wisdom of the water is that it's able to cleanse itself and purify and renew itself. Now with us in the middle of this system, it's having a little more challenging time. The water is, some people don't have water at all, even in our country. My husband's family have been hauling water all their life, and they live in Arizona. And so that would be one thing I would say. And the other thing is reusing, really look at where everything that you're bringing into your house comes from. Have a long-term view and see where the product is coming from. How far removed is your food from the way that it was grown? Has it been touched by man in such a way that it's so processed you can't even recognize what plant it came from? And start looking at how to eat more closely to the nature, the way that the food was provided. In our creation stories, we have certain foods that we were told, these are your foods, these are going to take care of you. These plants come out at this time in the spring, these salmon at this time of the year. And so realigning ourselves with nature. We have this world now where we can bring food from the other side of the planet and eat food that might not be in season for us, but is that necessarily healthy? Looking at the carbon footprints, also looking at the packaging, packaging and the single use of plastics and packaging is incredible, and especially when you travel. Oh my gosh, you waste so much on the road. And so like having people looking at the water that they drink in the day. Don't buy plastic bottles. Most of the companies that are bottling water don't really care about it. They're buying up the resources of the water for all of us. Water is a human right. Water should be a human right, not an exclusive right of certain corporations. So finding how to take care of our local watersheds, bringing a bottle of water that's in a glass jar or in a reusable water bottle is a simple thing that people can do. There's obviously much deeper things on the levels of how we eat, the beef industry and the contamination, the way that things are grown, how are animals taken care of? Are they, there's a lot that can be looked into.
It can keep going. It can keep going. I was trying to keep up with you in the chats here. These are great writing prompts. These are great journaling prompts. And they're great calls to action right there. Like to think about what are you putting in your body? Like that literally you are what you eat kind of thing. And that includes the gas it takes to get to you. You know what I mean? That's part of the contamination. That's part of the issue.
And the way that we're growing things too, I know that there's, with large industrial agriculture, we are destroying our soils. And if we're throwing chemicals on the ground, then we're killing all the microorganisms that are needed for those foods and for the health of the soil. So we're creating deserts. And so it's like we have to look at how to grow locally, organically, and small farmers need to be upheld. And if we have farmers markets, local stores that really cater to the local farmers, growing in a sustainable way that doesn't destroy the soil and the atmosphere, the air, the water, because all of these contaminants then go into the water and the air. And then that we're made of that. So we want to be made of that. So I think it's looking at ourselves as that microcosm I was talking about. What we take into our body, we become. And we need to go back and kind of look at how our ancestors were before, back when we were all probably in our traditional homelands, and knowing that there were certain foods and there were certain teachings and there were languages that we spoke. In those languages, there's wisdom. If we have those languages in our family, we need to encourage our children to keep those languages, because there's a lot of knowledge about these very teachings in there, and the mistakes that human beings have made since the beginning of time, and how to not keep repeating those. It's like you have to remember the history in order to not keep making the same mistake.
Exactly.
So those are, I think, 3 things. Maybe it was.
I'm sure. Basically, we're not doing enough, and we could do better. We could do more, and there's always more. And I think that I love the idea of in order to shepherd our legacy, the inheritors of our earth, into just a better circumstance, we have to begin now. We have to begin with ourselves. I love that. I know that we haven't talked much about your time at Hedgebrook itself. So how did you feel on the land there? How did you feel about the ethos, really? How did that feel in your spirit?
It was a wonderful experience, a beautiful place. And to be what is it called? I forgot the saying that you guys, radical
Hospitality.
Radical hospitality.
Yes.
Indeed was so true, just to be taken care of in that time in such a beautiful, thought out space in the right across the road from the beach, and among all the trees and local plants, local trees, and the little farmhouse where we had dinner. It was a really special time, And going out, I went out early in the morning and went across the street to that beach there, and had one of the most amazing mornings ever, and ended up writing a little bit about that experience. And it was really acknowledging the beauty of that place. And I think for women writers, it's just been a phenomenal support, so that we can have the time and be supported in that way to get these stories out, and feel that kind of time, to be able to just take that time and know that everything's taken care of for you. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
I think you're giving me a deeper understanding too of that radical hospitality. I mean, I'm new. I'm an alum, but I'm new to the inner workings. And what you just said, like taking care of things so that we're given that time, that is part of it. Is that you do feel when you're there in residency, you do feel that like there are people there who are going to make sure that the land is sustained and cared for, and that the people are sustaining it, and that the water is sustained and cared. Like that's part of the work of our wonderful land team, to just really nourish. And we're being fed from the garden, from the island, and from what's available there. And the water tastes a little funny because it's we're on an island. It's well water. It's going to be different, and it teaches you something. You can't avoid nature at Hedgebrook. I think that's the thing. You can't remain a city gal at Hedgebrook for too long. You're going to encounter some slugs and some bugs and some spiders, but also that sense of I think that's part of the holistic feeling. I'm realizing you said that, and I was like, oh, that's it. Knowing that you're eating from a garden you can see growing the food. And knowing that you're being nourished by the ducks that are right there laying the eggs, and like that kind of simpatico, that intimate, like I said, relationship is so apparent and vivid there. And I think I love that. I love the idea of bringing that home and fostering that more and more in your own environment. Is something that I think we're set up to do really well, because we saw it modeled. We saw it modeled at Hedgebrook, that respect, that true give and take. It's not just give and it's not just take. It's got to be both. I am super excited for Friday. I'm going to be with you all day long. We have a Vortex Intensive. This is a day-long retreat. It will begin with a little chat in the morning to set some intentions, some writing intentions for the day. And then Chenoa is going to lead us with what the Whale Child as a guide is going to lead us through some wonderful writing prompts to get into our storytelling, to get into our own stewardship of this world that we're living in. And then we will conclude with a group writing and sharing session facilitated by me and Jen, our community engagement coordinator. So we're really excited. There's still time to sign up if you're interested, if you need a day-long writing retreat and you want to delve into writing about nature, writing about your connection to it. Please join us this Friday. And before we sign off, I asked Chenoa if she would go ahead and wrap us up with a little bit more from the Whale Child.
Okay. So chapter 2, I just selected because this is the second character in the story. A little girl named Alex lived a content and happy life in the Pacific Northwest, close to the seashore with her mother and father. It was a place of tall green trees and water all around. Her mother's people were called Coast Salish, and they had lived in this place further back than history could remember. Her father's people were Polynesian, and they came from a distant island in the South Pacific Ocean. Both sides of Alex's family had important ties to the land and sea. Her great-grandparents and the generations before them knew that living in harmony with nature would ensure a healthy and plentiful world for the children yet to come. But when Alex was born, the respect and understanding that her ancestors held dear needed to be remembered by the living. Alex's mind was as sharp as a little fishhook, but she had not yet thought about things that might be wrong with her world and the future. One night, Alex's mother had a dream. In this dream, she swam out into the ocean toward a mother whale and her baby. In her dream, the baby whale turned into a human boy, and she welcomed him ashore. From her dream, she knew that this boy would share important gifts with her daughter. She knew that Alex would truly listen and understand. She knew Alex would share what she learned with a waiting world of young minds and open ears. When she awoke, she walked down to her daughter's room. "Wake up, Alex," her mother shook her gently. "There's something we must go see." And she walked her daughter down to the beach in the dark. As the sun rose from behind the mountains to the east, Alex and her mother stood side by side, watching the changing colors of dawn light up the surface that rolled back and forth upon the glistening sand. Alex looked out toward the horizon and believed she saw two whale tails in the distance, one big and one small, breaking the surface and then disappearing. Then Alex heard the haunting notes of a whale song drifting in on the tide. The song gradually grew louder, then stopped as she and her mother watched and waited. A human boy came up from the ocean. "Who is that?" Alex asked. "He is the boy I dreamed of," her mother answered. "He is your brother from the water, the boy who comes from the whales." Alex knew whales held a special place in the stories and legends of both her mother's and father's people. Elders called them the people who lived under the water. They represented the strength of community and working together. They could inspire happiness and luck, and she even heard that sometimes the presence of a whale meant that you were protected on your travels. But still, her mother's words were hard to believe. "My brother from the whales?" blurted Alex. "But that seems impossible. He must be a boy who fell off a boat or went for a late-night swim and lost his way, swept down the shoreline by a riptide." As Alex's mother watched the boy make his way toward them, she too was astounded by what she saw. But in a calm voice, she said to her little girl, "Magic such as this has always existed in the world. And nature will now teach you ancient and eternal truths for a better future. This boy is here to share lessons with a child of pure heart and open mind. So you must listen closely to what he says, for that special child is you, and his visit will pass quickly." Alex felt the truth of this, and her disbelief faded. She nodded and approached the boy with the comfort and kindness that children are born with, and adults often forget. "What's your name?" she asked. The boy spat out a big mouthful of water, seaweed, and sand. He blinked his eyes, then said, "Do you know how the sunlight shines on the waves when you look out over the ocean?" "Yes," said Alex, "I know it well." "Well, in my language, the language of the sea, my name means sunlight that shines into the deep ocean." "That's a very long name. I will call you Shiny," declared Alex. To that, the boy nodded his head and smiled, showing big chunks of green seaweed still stuck in his front teeth. "So you are a—" "Yep, a whale," Shiny confirmed. Alex nodded slowly, her eyes wide and the beginnings of a smile on her lips. "But that seems impossible," said Shiny. "Yep, seems impossible." Shiny looked back over his shoulder. "But here I am," he gestured toward the ocean, "and I came from far out there." Alex thought about her mother's words of magic in the world, and this was happening before her very eyes after all. So Alex replied, "Oh, I believe it. I said it seems impossible, not that it is impossible. And here you are, and here we are together."
Oh, I love it. I love it. It seems impossible. Oh, I believe it. Thank you so much, Chenoa. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing The Whale Child with us. We're so excited that you have this book out in the world, that you're about to change a whole bunch of young people's lives, and you're changing our lives too. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Flame. It's been wonderful. Great time together here, and look forward to Friday too.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. So join us this Friday for a day-long writing intensive with Chenoa Egawa based on The Whale Child, which you heard a little bit of today. We would love to see you there. We have a wonderful schedule built to get you really deep and immersive in these prompts that are coming from this wonderful book. Check out The Whale Child. Buy a copy for you. Buy a copy for a youth that you know. Buy a copy for a school that you love. There's so many ways you can support our alum here. And thank you so much for joining us for our Cottage Chat. It's May, right? Our May Cottage Chat. That's right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks for joining us.